ignoring this rock and roll stuff anymore. Every hotel and club in the country's wiring for information.
Hello, Groove Dogs. Welcome to the Runaway Radio Rewind, a program that looks and listens back to the heyday of one of America's truly great radio stations, the legendary and late KLOL. It's the Runaway Radio Rewind. And now, here's your host, Steve Robinson.
Hello again and welcome. This is the Runaway Radio Rewind. We salute those people who helped build, hands down, one of the biggest radio stations in Houston history. That's 101 KLOL. It's now gone, but the memories indeed remain. Today we're going to hear from Brian Shannon, a.k.a. Eddie the Boner Sanchez from Stevens and Pruitt, and it just wouldn't be a show without having Uncle Waldo stop by. So kick back, relax, it's showtime. The Runaway Radio Rewind, here's Brian Shannon.
The Holiday Ball originated at KEGL in Dallas. Right before we moved here, Halley's Comet came through, and we got the idea of having a formal watching party. If you're familiar with Dallas, the Reunion Tower with the big ball on top and all that has a revolving restaurant. And so it was going to be a client deal and invitation only and formal wear. We didn't do the lingerie and stuff for the women, but it was a formal, you had to wear a tux, you had to wear formal wear and go and watch the comet. And it was a huge success. The entire station and the entire show were just shocked. People would crawl over each other, and people were calling out of the woodwork, friends you hadn't heard from in forever. Are you telling me I can't go? I got to go. I need a pass. Give me tickets. What's up? All that. So we remembered that. And when we got to KLOL, we brought it back, and we brought it back as a Christmas party. And then we brought it back Stevens and Pruitt style, so it was tuxedos for the guys and, lingerie or whatever for the ladies. And you had to get those holiday ball passes. And lo and behold, it was the same thing. People would go crazy. One year we thought we were going to get killed. Sam Kennison, an old friend of ours, started coming to the third one. Well, it was held at an old club over here at Richmond and 610. And at that time, we were just doing, paper, invitations. They looked real nice and all that stuff. Well, somebody got one, and they started printing their own stack. So not only did we give away, 2,000 to fill this huge club, somebody's out there printing them, and I don't know if they were selling them or whatever, but the line was around the block, and people weren't getting in. And they took it out on us. They thought it was all our fault. So that was crazy. That was crazy. Kennison was there, and he helped us, calm everybody down in his own way and all that. But, yeah, Holiday Ball was just a phenomenon. But it started in Dallas as a comet watching party.
Were you ever worried about the Holiday Ball being, raided by the cops and stuff like that? Was that ever a serious worry?
There was thoughts about that, but we had a great relationship with HPD, especially the guys on the street. Some of the police chief, Sam Nucci, comes to mind because he had these bushy eyebrows, and so we presented him the Nucci bear. It had this unibrow at his office. He wasn't happy about that. Locke and Tubby surprised him with that. But the guys in the trenches really loved us. So we, if something was going to happen, we've kind of felt like we get kind of a high sign from somebody in the rank and file. But it was the other side of that coin. It was amazing. I won't name any names, but every year, U.S. and Texas senators and congressmen, representatives would call me looking for tickets, looking for passes. They wanted to go. They wanted to be there. And I always just played it off as, we've given them all out, things like, I'm sorry, sir, but some of the things you didn't want to expose. And 2 years in a row, we videotaped it, and it was pay-per-view. And those tapes are still cherished. I hear a lot of people that say, I still got mine, and I've still got my copies and all that. But I think it really, a lot of people didn't think that what we said was happening, and that proved that it was. So we had the Jiggle Bell Choir with, topless with the G strings and little bells, and they'd sing Jingle Bells, bouncing up and down like this, and all this stuff, all this crazy stuff. And it proved that it kind of was. And that was used against some advertisers.
Yes.
Against us. But the real loyal ones, they were there, so they didn't care.
Did things like the Holiday Ball and the content of the show, did that ever play havoc with any of the guys on the show's personal relationships with women? Or did it help?
I don't know that it helped, but it didn't bother. It didn't bother Mark's wife. Joy rolled with it. My wife at the time, I met her while I was at KLOL, and so she was around it and she knew. So our personal relationships, it never really, dug in too much. If you're playing a strip club from 9 to 11. A little tip of advice is somewhere between 11:30 and 11:45, your butt needs to be coming in the back door of your house, and you don't hang out for another 2 or 3 hours. That seems to help a little bit too. And they're like, okay, it's a job, and he's enjoying it, but he leaves at 11 as soon as he can, and he comes home. But of course, I had to get up at 4 o'clock. So what else was I going to do?
Relationship advice from Eddie the Boner Sanchez.
Chase, take it from me.
So you mentioned Sam Kinison. I remember him as being obviously a huge friend of the show. Yeah. Who else would you put in that sort of category with Sam?
Oh, let's see. All the touring comics, and they weren't as big then as they are now. But George Lopez would always show up anytime we needed his help or want him to come out. Carlos Mencia at that time was really hitting his stride. I'd put him in there. Let's see. All the old Oilers. Bruce Matthews was a big fan, and he would come out and help us. Warren Moon did our show when we had the Oilers games on KTRH and KLOL, and he'd do our show on Monday morning, and he'd come out and he would do a whole heck of a lot with us. Elijah Wan to a certain extent, and Clyde the Glide, when he was here after Portland, we did a lot of stuff with him. So we had a lot of good connections like that with the local sports heroes.
How much of the show was? You mentioned that there wasn't a lot of scripting other than Uncle Waldo.
There was no scripting.
But how much of the show was planned and structured, like we're going to do this and then we're going to do this, and then it would happen organically? And how much was just like you never knew what direction it was going to go in it, and it just went there, and pretty soon you just had to go to commercial?
The shows were always blocked. I would book satellite interviews with celebrities. We'd have this here, this interview here. We'd interview authors. We'd have the comedians come in. We had it blocked, and that was pretty much it. For the next 5 minutes for this break, we're going to be talking to, Carlos Mencia. George Lopez is here. And then after that, it's just winging it, just talking, having a conversation. We always wanted the show to sound like you and 5 of your buddies sitting around having a beer, shooting the shit, and making each other laugh. That was the whole concept.
All across America, I don't know if you know the names Stevens and Pruitt, all right? But I'll tell you, in Texas, they're as famous as the Alamo. I think you guys are funny. I think you guys are humorous. I think you have a great sense of humor. You guys are better than Howard Stern ever thought of being.
So we didn't want to take any of that surprise element or natural element out of it. So that was pretty much it. We knew what we were going to do break to break. The only time we would have to wing it is like if a satellite interview canceled at the last minute. We scrap, but 3 old bullshitters like Mark and Jim and I and Martha and Lori Kendrick, and in later years Chuck Schrammick that did news and all that. We could fill 5 minutes in our sleep.
Where did Locke come from?
Locke dates back with Mark and Jim to Hudson and Harrigan, 610 AM, where they met. Mark was the 3rd Hudson, Jimmy was the 5th Harrigan. That's how they became a team. While they were there, Locke and I are the same age, so he was in high school while they were on Sports 610, or not Sports 610, but KILT 610 AM. And he would call them. He liked the show. He would call in, and one particular day, he invited them to come up to his high school. Can't remember which high school it was. He and his family lived in the Woodlands, but it was somewhere up there. And he invited Mark and Jim to show up and speak at a student assembly. So they drive up there after the show. They get to the school. They go to the office and they're like, yeah, we're Hudson and Harrigan from 610. We're here to do the student rally. And they're looking at him and goes, what? He goes, yeah, there's kind of like a student meeting or something, and we're supposed to talk. We don't have that. Who did you talk to? And he goes, it's a student invited us, Locke Siebenhausen, and said literally the lady's voice with, oh. So they went and got Locke, brought him down. He like, yeah, good to see you. Good to Mark and Jim. So he goes through the whole deal, and that's where they met him. Years later, after we're come back to KLOL and we're doing the show, lo and behold, Mark and his wife are walking through the Galleria, and he hears a familiar voice DJing at the ice skating rink. Yes, everybody skate, And he goes, oh my God, that's that kid. So he goes down and he talks to him at the deal, strikes up a rapport, and then he comes back and he goes, Jimmy, you remember when we went up to the Woodlands for that deal, that goofy kid, and all that? Oh, yeah. He goes, he's a DJ at the ice rink at the Galleria. We got to be able to do something with him. Here he comes. And the second most asked question, you asked me earlier, where did Boner come from, is always number one. The second most asked question, well, I'll take it back. It's a tie. Second most asked question is, did that shit really happen in the studio? Yes, it did. And is Locke Siebenhausen really that way, or is it a character? And yes, he is really that way.
And is that his real actual name?
That is his real actual name.
Wow.
Yeah, his parents were big-time Rice grads and supporters, and so his mom and dad's name is on a building at Rice University, and their son is on the Stevens and Pruitt show. Talk about a 180.
Good stuff from just an awesome guy. That is Brian Shannon, otherwise known as Eddie the Boner Sanchez. Now, if you haven't done so, be sure you check out RunawayRadioRewind.com. Okay, kids, it's time for Uncle Waldo.
The magnificent teenage sword swallower type person. This script was authored by Amy Weetsey of Arlington, Texas.
What's her name?
Was scene one, and yes, we find our hero, Uncle Waldo, the magnificent teenage sword swallower type person, on stage in the Cotton Bowl. Yes, he is the warm up act for Bruce Springsteen. And as an incredible sword swallower, he does the incredible. Of course, we must realize that his stage manager is the legendary Big Bruno, his good friend and neighbor. Well, Uncle Waldo is on stage. And as usual, he swallows a sword. He swallows a cane. And then he swallows a yardstick. And as the thundering climax to his act, he swallows a dog log.
A what?
As we join our
He
players...
swallows a what?
Dog log.
A dog log. Oh, man.
The end of this drama must go on. Theater must rear its ugly head. In Act 1, Scene 1, Uncle Waldo's on stage. And yes, he swallows the sword. And then our hero, Uncle Waldo, swallows a cane. And then our hero swallows a yardstick. And then it's time for Uncle Waldo's grand finale.
Go ahead, Uncle Waldo. Go ahead, Uncle Waldo. Go ahead, swallow the dog log. Swallow it.
No. I can't do it.
What do you mean you can't do it? There's thousands of people looking at you right now. Do it, Uncle Waldo. Swallow the dog log.
I ain't going to do it, and you can't make me. I don't want to do it. I'm not going to do it.
Why don't you want to do it, Uncle Waldo? You do it every night. Why don't you do it?
There's a hair on it.
You've been listening to the Runaway Radio Rewind. Join us next week for more memories and goodness for the intelligentsia from the people who made the former KLOL what it was. Find us online at RunawayRadioRewind.com and be sure to grab your Runaway Radio gear. You can find the show on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Google Play. Show us your dog, and we'll see you next week on the Runaway Radio Rewind.